5 key balls in the Virginia game. You want to give yours first or me?
Well, I have a column on Off the Hook Sports right now showing it, so I maybe I should give mine first.
Let's go with yours, and I'll tell you what mine would have been.
So mine is not. I want to be clear here. Mine is not matchup based. It will be matchup based towards the middle and end of the season, but it's Virginia. This is about seeing what we need to see from players we have questions about. Would you agree with me from that premise, Dave?
Totally. This is
All
a
right,
game where
so
you should be able to make individual plays against a lesser opponent.
right. So number 5 for me is Keenan Peely because there's a lot of hype behind him taking over Jeremy Banks' job at linebacker, and I think the expectations are there, and I think we actually need to see it from him in a game. So I'm pretty high on Keenan Peely for that.
I will go to offset that. It's the countdown, right? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
I will go Aaron Beasley because Peely should open things up for him, and everybody that contributes to this off the hook sports thing that we got going. Half the people think that he's not going to be any good and overrated, and the other half seem to think he's going to have a breakout year. So I'll go Beasley, you go Peely. Who's number 4?
Number 4 for me is the guy I just mentioned who I think is going to have the biggest leap in the defensive backfield, and that's Wesley Walker. I couldn't name a cornerback because I don't know who's going to be starting at cornerback. And I know anybody who says they do is lying. Nobody knows what they're going to do at cornerback because I don't think they have an answer. But Wesley Walker stepping in to take Trey Flowers' role after a strong finish to last year, I'm really excited to see the leap he makes, and I think that's what we need to look for against Virginia.
Number 4, I have Squirrel White. Just heard so much about him. His interviews have been just so confident, and he's actually talkative, which tells me that last year was kind of like a snowstorm of attention and being able to adapt to Tennessee's playbook, and he still stood out. So what does he do this year with another year? Number 3, Caleb Calhoun.
Number 3 for me, I'm going to the offensive line, and I'm going John Campbell Jr. at left tackle. Now, he's listed as a either or with Gerald Mincy, but I think the job is his. The coaches wanted the job to be his. They targeted him out of Miami, and they basically, I don't want to say they pulled an Ed Orgeron, Brent Schaefer move where they gave him the keys to the car before he even stepped foot on campus, but it seemed like they were trying to give him the keys to the car before he stepped foot on campus.
No, they did. And I don't even know why he's an or on the depth chart. I mean, he's going to be the guy. And they talked about how nice it was to have that left tackle position locked down. The next guy I'm going with is Dylan Sampson because I heard so much about him in the spring and throughout the summer. Not as much maybe in preseason camp, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ripped off 3 plays that are 25-plus yards. I will go ahead and make that prediction right now, either catching the football or running out of the backfield. 25-plus yards, 3 plays, Dylan Sampson.
It's funny you say that because I think I learned kind of watching the Hurt and Kamara duo, but now really watching running backs, like I understand why there's why you have the workhorse player of the game, because a lot of times a running back that shoulders the load and gets all the carries in the middle, they'll get all the carries, but then a guy like Sampson will get all the yards because of the change of pace. And then it kind of devalues the work that a Jabari Small or Jalen Wright put in throughout the game, shouldering all the hits in the middle. I've kind of learned that about running backs as I go on.
So do we have your number 3? Have we gotten your number 3?
Yeah, we have. Okay. We got number 3. Number 2 is I got Ollie Lane stepping in at center for Cooper Mays. That's a huge question, and we need to see what he can do.
Man, I feel about as poppy as who's your favorite singer? Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift is one of my favorite singers.
I'm going with all the popular ones, so maybe I'm being lame about this, but it's Joe Milton. I mean, I want to see what he does, and I'll go ahead and wrap up my 5. Number 1, the guy I want to see the most is a little quarterback that I think is going to be pretty good sooner rather than later. His name is Nico Iamaleava. I think he's going to be the takeaway from the game on Saturday.
So I'm number 1. What your number 2 is, which is Joe Milton, because again, that we talked about Joe Milton at the beginning of the game of the show. I'm still, again, I am not convinced from the Orange Bowl. And by the way, there were a lot of throws that Joe Milton missed in that Orange Bowl and a lot of drives that stalled. Go back and watch that game. So I think the system is going to allow him to be productive, but I still am not a full-on believer, even though I think he's going to start the full year.
Yeah, I just want to see Nico whip it. I want to see how comfortable he is in the pocket. It's going to be garbage time, so we're not going to be able to make a true assessment of it. But I want to see how comfortable he is. I hear about his maturity, and he's like, when he came to Tennessee, he was 17 going on 28. I've heard so much of that. I've heard how he's approachable. He's bonded with his teammates. I have not heard one bad thing. And I would tell you if I did, I have not heard one bad thing on or off the record about Nico. I haven't heard one bad thing about Joe Milton either. So those are why those are my top two.
Real honest question, Dave, about this coaching staff, because I covered the Butch Jones years, and I don't think I've ever been lied to more by a staff than Butch Jones on players that they were high on that never saw the field in a season. Do you get that vibe from this coaching staff, or do you think they're a little more honest with you if someone's not producing or not when they leak stuff to the media?
I think the people that I'm talking to are being pretty forthright. I think when Josh Heupel goes out there and talks about Joe Milton, and he does, and doesn't bring up Nico a lot unless he's asked, and then he gives a bland answer, I think that's to pump Joe up and make sure that Joe knows that he's not going to have any sort of issue losing his job if he has one bad game. So I base it off two things. I base it off what I'm told in confidence, and I'm basing it off. I think Josh Heupel's a gutsy dude, a really gutsy dude. And I think if Joe Milton had had an awful offseason and Nico had had a great offseason, I think he'd pull the trigger. I do. At some point in the summer, I think he would have pulled the trigger. I don't think he's scared to do that, but I don't think he needs to do that because Joe's been that good. At the end of the day, I think we'll talk about Nico being better than Milton. Okay, 5 years from now, as a whole career. But who's the most ready to play on Saturday against Virginia, then Austin Peay, then at Florida? There's no question in my mind. It's Joe Milton.
But you've covered staffs, haven't you, where they blatantly feed you lies and misleading information, and then it totally throws you off guard when you watch the season, and you're like, that's not what they were feeding us in the off season?
Oh, yeah. There will be a dude. We named 10 guys together, or roughly 8, because we had some double ups, or 9, I think. There will be a dude outside of that 9, and it might be Tyler Barron. I'm just throwing him out there. It might be that guy that will have a big game that hasn't been asked about. But Josh Heupel's not going to go to that podium and say, man, I can't tell you how great Tyler Barron is. There's no reason to do that unless you ask about him. And he only talks to the media for roughly 11 minutes and 28 seconds.
Well, I was saying the reverse. I was talking about where the coaching staff props up the player that turns out to be complete garbage during the year or doesn't even see the field, where they lie to you, and they lie. Like Butch Jones did this to us all the time. He would pretend that he would feed narratives that this player was really standing out in spring and fall camp, and then never see the field in the fall. Never see the field once.
Well, fair question here. Rocky Top Tom says, do you really though, Dave? He showed some loyalty talking about Heupel to a fault with Joe before. Remember what we all talked about last week with Hendon Hooker and Joe before last year. The difference is, and Caleb's brought it up, Hooker was not Heupel's guy. He was not brought in by Heupel. And I think that Joe Milton is like the shiny sports car because he can do everything and he can throw it a million miles. But I think Nico is every bit as talented. He just happens to be about 30 pounds lighter. So, yes, I do. I think they're both his guys that he brought in. And I think if somewhere along the lines, there's a reason that the indoor workout facility, Caleb, is right next to the coach's office. Coaches aren't really allowed to be there in the summer workouts, but all you got to do is step outside your office and you can watch. So I think if he saw Nico outperforming Joe, I do think he would pull the trigger. But I think we're beyond that, right? We're beyond that, though, right? We're not talking about that happening against Virginia.
Right, exactly. And let's be fair. And my older brother brought this up to me, so I'm going to give him a shout out on the show. But yes, I still criticize Josh Heupel for making that decision to start Joe. Yes, I think it was because Joe was his guy and he looked past Hooker outperforming him. However, I know too many coaches that would have had the arrogance to stick with Joe throughout the year, even when Hooker was clearly better. Heupel was willing to make that switch to Hooker like that. Hooker took the job and didn't lose it. How many coaches do you know, Dave, that would have so badly wanted their guy to stay the starter and would have kept him on the field, even if Hooker was clearly better?
Now, let me ask you this. Could we have a Jalen Hurd, Alvin Kamara situation? we all knew that Alvin Kamara was better, but Jalen Hurd got paid. And he just did. I can tell you that through recruiting circles. And when you pay a player, he has leverage over you. That's why it was really stupid to pay players back in the day, but it wasn't pragmatic because they can say, I can go to the media and tell everybody you gave me money and they're going to let me go somewhere and play immediately and you're going to get in trouble. I believe Jalen Hurd got paid and I believe his family was willing to go to the media and say that. And that's why Alvin Kamara got 25% of the snaps instead of 75%, which he should have.
And they publicly trashed Alvin Kamara too all the time. Funny enough, his mom would. Jalen Hurt's mom would. It was kind of a weird situation altogether. I don't think so because I totally put that on Butch Jones. You know, Butch Jones was totally willing to kowtow and you talked about it, just to sell things for recruiting. And look, Lane Kiffin did that too. So I'm not going to let, Lane Kiffin sat there and brought in a class that you bring out all the time, had more criminals than all SEC players.
More felons than all SEC players.
Yes. And he did it because he wanted to sell things for recruiting. That was why I will never forget there were times on the goal line he brought in Bryce Brown instead of Montario Hardesty when Brown still did not have the proper vision on things. He was trying his best to sell that class. And I mean, he did it at the expense of Tennessee in that 2009 season.
Let me ask you this, because a lot of times position battles are closer than we really think. And it seems like an obvious answer to go with guy A, and then he gets more experience. And what happens, Caleb? He gets significantly better than guy B, right? I mean, that's just natural because of the experience. But if it were 45% that they like Joe over Nico, would the NIL money factor in? Do you get a phone call from Walmart because he showed up on my Instagram feed as shopping at Walmart? I don't know if that was the actual sponsor or the item he was sponsoring, but you're talking about what, 8 million? If you get that call and you're close, does it affect who you play? I know this is crazy talk, but you got
not only if Joe doesn't perform the way he should or if he performs questionably. I think everybody who cobbled that NIL money together for Nico, I think at this point it's an open secret at Knoxville that Tennessee expects to start Joe for the year. So I think most of the NIL investors are accepting that. They just demand that Nico start next year.
Yeah. They're not going to go get Joey Matthews to step in there.